And there were no member updates. And with that, we adjourned. If anyone sees edits, please send me an email or a chat, and I'm happy to make corrections and update the website too.
Yeah, Laura, on mine, where you've got the treasurer's report, I did not do a budget estimate. I just did the treasurer's report.
Oh, okay. Yep, I can correct that. Sorry about that.
If anyone else has any of the non-board members or executive board members have a change or something, you can type that in the chat feature to the host, and then I will be glad to share that with Laura. But does any of the board members, is there a motion to approve the minutes with the changes?
This is Ann Elmore. I so move.
I second Pam.
First and second, so moved. And those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
So motion passes. Thank you. And Laura, I'm going to take the ball back from you. So, and on our agenda, our next item is for Pam. I'm going to Pam for the treasurer's report. Pam, do you wish for me just to bring it up from the website to share?
Sure, that would be fine, Kevin.
Okay, I will share the screen and I will pull it over here. Go ahead, Pam.
Okay, as you can see, we started July 1st, 2020 with $15,991.01. We have a reserve of $3,000 set aside in case certain things would happen during the year, like canceling an event or whatever. Our beginning balance was $12,991.01. We have organizational agents that joined this year for totals 400, individuals of 100, student individuals 30, so total membership 530. Our expenses, the website, post office, membership to the Coalition on Aging. We did a sponsorship for the Coalition on Aging's conference they had last year. PayPal expenses of $556, so total expenses of $619.56. We have a balance as of today of $12,901.45. We did have 2 new members join since the last meeting, organization members, Disability Rights and Catawba County Department of Social Services. So we welcome them. That's it.
Wonderful.
Great.
Is there a motion to accept the treasurer's report?
I make a motion.
I second it. This is
Mayer.
Ann.
And Ann seconds it. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Likewise? Okay, motion passes. And I see Laura Cogman has joined us now. Laura, let me see if I can make you, can you speak and so we can hear you?
Hey.
There we go. I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can turn it over to Ann to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Kevin. Sorry, y'all. I just had a hard time getting in this morning. Our services here are up and down. Anyway, thank you all for attending today. It's great to have you with us. And I'm going to turn it over to Ann Elmore, and Ann is going to introduce our speaker for today.
Good morning, all. I'm Ann Elmore, and along with Todd Martin, we chair the Education Committee, and it is our pleasure, thanks to our colleagues at AARP North Carolina, we have a national speaker, E.A. Casey from AARP Foundation. Casey is a speaker to meet the moment. The moment being, of course, when we're in the midst of a pandemic, we hope we see the light growing in size at the end of the tunnel. We hope it's not a train coming at us like the folks in Italy have experienced. But what has happened is it has shone a light, a bright light on a problem that's been going on for some time. And our speaker today Casey has addressed this issue, been looking into social isolation well before the pandemic started. So it's our very great pleasure today to introduce E.A. Casey, a strategic advisor and program manager with AARP Foundation. With a focus on social connectedness, Casey has led the development and implementation of strategies and programs to combat isolation and loneliness among vulnerable older adults. Working with researchers and practitioners from around the globe, Casey has developed and managed a broad portfolio of research, programs, and grants to address isolation. Casey now helps manage connecttoeffect.com. That platform elevates awareness of isolation as the major public health issue it is. It was before the pandemic, but by golly, now a bright light has been shown on this problem as the numbers have exploded. Connect to Effect also drives creation and dissemination of solutions. Casey holds a Master of Public Affairs from the LBJ School at the University of Texas at Austin. And currently, Casey is working on a Master's in Clinical Social Work at Catholic University. Casey, thank you very much for joining us. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Anne, and thank you all for having me. Please let me know if you're by chat, if you're having any trouble hearing me, and hopefully Anne will burst in and save us. But I'm really pleased to be talking with you all today. As Anne was describing, I've had a chance for a number of years now to share information about isolation, study social isolation, and work with some of the country's brightest minds around isolation for a number of years. So it's always really exciting to share some of those lessons with folks and to get an opportunity to learn from you all too. Every time I give a talk, I learn so much more and begin to weave new things into the next conversation. So I hope that this can be as much of a dialogue as possible. Feel free to use the chat function to jump in with questions and comments, and hopefully Anne will draw my attention to those as we go along. But I wanted to start out by sharing with you, so my slides today are kind of cobbled together from a few sources, but where I start with what you're looking at here is our Connect to Effect community workshop. And these are slides that are actually available on our Connect to Effect site, along with a facilitator's guide that you can download and deliver on your own in various contexts. We wanted to create a set of resources, and this is part of a growing set of resources to help stakeholders like yourselves educate different types of audiences around this issue, and to begin to have community conversations about what this problem of isolation and loneliness are. So these exist on the website, and I will kind of use them as the basis for our discussion today, and give you a little bit of information about how you could use these slides, and then add in some additional information that doesn't come in the standard set of slides that's just for you all. So the slides go on to have a introduction section, and we leave spaces where you can, as a facilitator, fill in information for yourself. And if you're delivering it to a community group, have some icebreaker conversation to really get the conversation going. Part of the idea of these slides is that they might be used in a community setting where you are educating older adults about this issue and helping them begin to think about how to address it in their own lives. So part of what we try to do in the basic version of the workshop is give folks an opportunity to start practicing some of those connection skills that we think are necessary to help them ward off social isolation. So we have a kind of icebreaker section where folks can begin to get started. But as I said, my name's Casey, E.A. Casey. I just go by my last name, Casey. I'm a they, them, but don't worry about it too much. As Anne said, I'm now working on a clinical social work master's. I am doing community case management with older adults. It's really a passion of mine that has emerged out of this national work that we've been doing around social isolation for a number of years. And here, we've been doing this work here at AARP Foundation, which, as you probably all know, there is AARP, which is the bigger mothership, I like to call it, the AARP that you're familiar with at the state level that does great state advocacy, as well as national level advocacy. We are actually the charitable affiliate in the foundation, with a focus on senior poverty, and an understanding of how economic opportunity and social connectedness really underpin economic well-being. So that's been a part of our work for a really long time, focusing on social isolation, and it's something that we launched almost 10 years ago in the foundation, before, well before the pandemic and well before this is a hot topic for folks. And we built out Connect to Effect from there as our online presence, where we could really begin to share resources, share our learnings, begin to help folks connect to the resources they might need in their community, and just begin to learn about this topic. It has grown immensely over the years, and I'm excited to let you all know that we have actually been selected by HHS's Administration for Community Living as the National Coordinating Center related to isolation for older adults and people with disabilities. So as part of that effort, we are really building out a lot more resources, a lot of different activities, and there's much more to come, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But just to get started with what are we really talking about when we're talking about isolation, and what is the sort of the size of the problem? We actually, our latest best data, and this is pre-pandemic numbers, suggests that about 1 in 4 older adults are already facing some degree of social isolation that negatively impacts them. So that's a pretty huge, sizable chunk of the population of older adults. We think several million who are already experiencing the detrimental effects of isolation and suffering the wide range of health consequences from it. We also think or know from the pandemic that this is probably leading to isolation for a number more folks. I mean, certainly I, sitting here in my studio apartment in Washington, DC, have become quite isolated in a number of ways over the last year. And I think that's the story of a lot of folks, especially older adults. So I think this is a problem that we see is growing. But even before the pandemic, we knew that this was really a public health crisis. There is a huge body of evidence now that tells us that social isolation and loneliness are as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and worse than obesity. So isolation and loneliness have been linked to just a huge range of negative health consequences, earlier onset of dementia and cognitive decline, greater risk of heart disease. In addition, more susceptibility to fraud, abuse, more likelihood of needing to go into long-term care settings, more likelihood of ending up in the emergency room. So we really know that isolation and loneliness are incredibly bad for our health. And that's, of course, across the lifespan. We know that that's true for younger people, and that younger people are experiencing really dramatically high rates of loneliness, actually, we're seeing. And that those negative health effects for people who are experiencing loneliness and isolation for a longer period of time can be really serious and lasting. There's also linkages between isolation, loneliness, and increased substance abuse and mental illness. So we know that this is a serious problem that's not going away. In fact, it's probably getting worse. And as older adults are being stuck at home and becoming perhaps more frail, deconditioning, things like that, delaying medical care, I think we expect this problem to continue to grow. Before I go any further, though, I wanted to get some definitions out of the way. So I think you may have noticed that I'm using the term social isolation and loneliness. And much of the time when we're talking about these issues, folks will use them interchangeably. You'll see them, especially in the media, which really has taken quite an interest in this topic over the last few years, using the terms isolation and loneliness interchangeably. And it's really important actually to recognize that those are separate constructs and sort of separate problems. What we do know is that in some ways they're related, sort of like two sides of the same coin, but isolation is the much more objective aspect of what we're talking about, where a person really has limited or no social ties with others, no family or friends, perhaps is homebound to a degree or not really leaving home, and really alone in most senses of the word objectively. Loneliness is the more subjective aspect. It's really the perception of feeling lonely, of feeling like you don't have the support that you need around you. And what we know is that this is actually just as bad as not having the support. Both of these conditions, both not having support and feeling like you don't have support, are as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We think there are a number of ways that this kind of works. And I'll get into that a little bit more, but the best science on loneliness now is that it is sort of more akin to a mental health condition, and that some of the best science around it is about how do we use those cognitive behavioral techniques to help people overcome a sense of not belonging or a difficulty connecting, and begin to pursue relationships and connections that are meaningful for them. In terms of isolation, it can be a much more complicated picture that is driven by cultural and social factors, by health conditions that limit a person's ability to engage, and so on. And so actually, this is a bonus slide that I added in to kind of cover some of those different factors that really can play into social isolation, because I think one of the things that we have really learned over time is that isolation is not quite one thing. It's really a complicated issue with a wide range of causes. And that ultimately, much of what needs to happen is to think about those causal factors that a person is experiencing and to begin to address those so that folks can either overcome the barriers that keep them from being able to connect, or are able to find new ways of connecting that are meaningful and appropriate for them. So this just kind of shows you some of the different ways that, on a society and community sort of level, there are factors that can drive isolation. The biggest one pretty much across any setting in the US is transportation. Older adults struggle mightily with transportation all around this country, and not being able to get where you need to go or to see the people that you care about is very isolating. Similarly, design of neighborhoods or safety of neighborhoods and buildings and physical spaces can really be a driver of isolation. In more urban settings, you may see folks who don't feel safe, even in their own large, subsidized senior housing building, much less walking around within their community. More rural settings, of course, often don't have resources that people can get to connect to. And then certainly we also believe that there are general social barriers that, ageism works to exclude a lot of folks, that different forms of discrimination, for instance, have made the LGBT community particularly susceptible to social isolation. At an individual level, one of the biggest things that we believe is a driver of isolation is poverty or a lack of income. You know, connecting, it takes money in most cases. You know, you have to have money to get the places you want to go, to have the technology that you increasingly must have these days to be able to connect. And you need money to stay healthy, frankly, in many cases in our country. So usually we see much higher rates of isolation in populations that are lower income. Another major driver of isolation, we believe, is hearing loss, especially. Vision loss too, but hearing loss especially is undertreated in the US, with millions of folks not really having access to affordable hearing health care. And we know that once folks start to not be able to hear and engage with the folks around them, it's very easy for them to begin to withdraw, begin to stop having conversations rather than risk the embarrassment of not hearing or deal with the struggle of that. So we know that hearing loss is really, I think, a major driver of isolation. We also do see correlations between living alone and isolation. In fact, some of the studies show that living alone is actually just as bad for our health as being entirely isolated. You know, there's research that shows that simply sleeping alone under the roof without anybody else knowing that anybody else is under that roof, it has an impact on your health. You know, the simple story is that humans are social creatures, that for thousands and thousands of years, we have survived and thrived by coming together in groups to accomplish things. And our bodies have really adapted in a number of ways to do best when we are around other people and have other people to rely on. And so a lot of the theory around loneliness actually is that it is a sort of maladaptive response, much like hunger or thirst is to tell our bodies that we need to add food or water, that something is missing from us. Loneliness actually registers as physical pain on brain scans, and that is, we think, you know, an indication that of your body telling you that you don't have the connection that you really need as a human to thrive and do well. Some of the other things we know about in terms of isolation, being a caregiver, especially an older caregiver to a spouse or somebody dealing with dementia, can be really isolating, can really take you away from your regular life and your ability to connect with other people. Similarly, retirement is a major transition point for many older adults that can really cut folks off from you know, a major source of their social network and a major source of connection that can be very hard to replace once you leave the workplace. Loss of memory, we also believe, is connected. Folks, you know, start to feel self-conscious about these issues, or just simply have difficulty connecting in a number of ways. And similarly, chronic health conditions can really create a lot of barriers for people, you know, linked, of course, to issues of mobility. If folks can't safely get around, if they're concerned about falling, excuse me, if they are too tired or not able to stand for long periods of time, you know, they're obviously not going to try to leave the house very much. So thinking about those ways that you can kind of support people in their personal mobility and keep them physically healthy becomes very important. And then, of course, we know that interpersonal loss is another huge transition point that folks experience. You know, the depression and grief that comes along with losing a loved one can be really debilitating for some folks, and especially we see for older men who have often relied on a female spouse to be their central point of social connection, it can be a really difficult situation to sort of recover from when that main point of connection dies. I also here we sort of begin to tease out some of the ideas on how you fix these issues. And as I was saying, you really have to focus in on what is the individual problem that somebody might be experiencing related to isolation. And how do you begin to match that up to solutions that exist in communities? So that's where we think it's really important to take that person-centered approach to holistically understanding what needs and challenges an individual has, and then what are the opportunities and resources that are available in communities to meet those needs and challenges. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit here, because I wanted to tell you about some recent work that we have done with the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. Excuse me, I can never remember all these acronyms that we have. But actually, last year in February, just before the real start of the pandemic, we worked with the National Academies to release this consensus study on social isolation and loneliness in older adults, and specifically the opportunities for the healthcare system. So it was a really interesting project that brought together some of the best minds in the field on this topic to really begin to translate what we know into thinking about how healthcare settings in particular can be an important part of this linkage, and how do we think about beginning to use healthcare systems as a way to identify people who are struggling with this, and then find or connect them to appropriate resources. So I point this out as a great resource that exists out there that has a lot of key terms, a lot of the most recent data, and apparently it's been one of the most downloaded ever reports from the National Academies. I think that's mostly an effect of the timing in which we were talking about isolation, right, as a massive pandemic, and the implications of that were starting to hit the country. But I thought that I would highlight for you all a couple of the points from it that I think are really most relevant to folks and organizations like the ones that you represent. And really, so one of the major goals that's outlined in the recommendations of the reports is about the importance of improving awareness. Excuse me, anytime I talk, I start losing my voice. So how isolated I am right now, I guess. But one of the key recommendations is really that we just need to begin to educate the general public, as well as all of the relevant stakeholders and communities, about what this issue is. That it is a serious issue with really tangible consequences, both for people's health as well as for our healthcare system in general. I think one point that I didn't share with you before, but another piece of this work is our colleagues over at AARP did some research on this topic and found that Medicare annually spends over $6 billion on the issue of isolation. So we were able to look at patients within Medicare who had characteristics of being isolated and control out the data and figure out how much spending within the Medicare system that isolation accounts for. And it comes out to over $6 billion. And that's in folks needing extra care, needing to go into kind of rehab situations from the hospital because they don't have the care at home that they need, from folks showing up at the hospital in more acute, urgent situations because they've been delaying or putting off healthcare, and folks having to just generally stay in the hospital longer and be sicker because of isolation. So really beginning to empower consumers about what this topic is and how they can take their own steps around it is part of what this workshop is at its core, is how do we begin to help people think about what a social health portfolio looks like, in the same way that we often proactively manage our financial health or our physical health. We need folks to begin thinking about and proactively managing their social health too. Another huge recommendation out of the report was about the importance of strengthening the ties between the healthcare system and community-based networks and resources. You know, I think this is a little bit challenging right now, as so many of our healthcare systems have really been enormously burdened by the pandemic. But we know that figuring out how we can do a better job of really connecting systems to those community-based networks and the many good resources that exist is a critical first step in starting to solve this problem and trying to sort of find the folks who are most isolated and get them to the help that they need. Excuse me. Here I wanted to share some highlights from a somewhat recent article that I helped author that showed up in Frontiers in Public Health about the social connectivity paradox that we were seeing. So this was just an attempt to highlight some of the ways that the pandemic has made physical social distancing really important for folks, but at the same time has created all of this likelihood of increased isolation and the healthcare burden of that isolation. We also highlighted in the article, and this is where I think it's most relevant to you, some of the ways that we feel like there are already really incredibly strong pieces of infrastructure in place for reaching older adults in the aging network, in the work that you all do. And that really so much of what needs to happen is just about beginning to coordinate and come together to figure out how we can sort of tighten up the network of resources so that people who are isolated don't fall through the cracks. So kind of some immediate action items we lay out around raising awareness. And then of course we highlight the importance of access to broadband at this point and technology that really can support connections. I think as we've all seen in this pandemic, now more than ever, being connected, being online is you know, almost essential to functioning in many ways. But of course, older adults who might most benefit from telehealth, from you know, being able to do online baking, from being able to connect to friends and family online, are most left out of being able to do that. So how we begin to improve the access and feasibility and appropriateness of technology for older people is really critical. Here then, this goes back to the regular presentation flow, where we offer some tips to general consumers about ways that they can stay connected. These have been edited to be sort of social distancing friendly to keep people safe during the pandemic. But we really wanted to start people down a path of thinking about the practical steps they can begin to take around connection. So simple things like scheduling time every day to call a friend, taking a short walk every day to stay active, doing something pleasant and soothing to help you stay in a positive frame of mind, saying hello to neighbors, getting involved in online groups and activities, really basic stuff that many people will have thought of by now, but I think helping to couch it as sort of an important practice and helping people kind of schedule out or plan out some of it is really important. So we then dive into, in the session, if desired, you can have kind of a conversation where folks share some of what they've been doing, and you can generate some interesting or novel ideas around it. You can share your own different highlighted organizations and resources that you might want to. And then we also share some of the AARP Foundation and AARP most relevant resources. This will continue to grow as the National Coordinating Center grows, but these are some really good resources. As Anne was highlighting, connecttoeffect.org, where we really have a large and growing wealth of activities, resources. There's a self-assessment that folks can take, either for themselves or for a loved one, to really find out about what their level of risk for isolation is. You get kind of a red, yellow, green indicator of your level of isolation risk, and you get customized feedback about different steps you might take to address any of those areas of risk. AARP also offers some interesting different resources. Its Community Connections page has all kinds of mutual aid groups around the country where you can get connected in the community. And we, of course, offer some coronavirus resources. And then Create the Good is a place where you can find local as well as remote volunteering opportunities, because all the data indicates that volunteering, staying engaged in that way, is a really great way of staying connected. It allows us an opportunity to engage in meaningful activity that might give us a sense of purpose, which is really important to our ability to feel connected. And then volunteering is also a great way for folks to meet other people and connect to like-minded individuals and share a sense of community. Here we take some time to dive into something we call the Friendventory activity. And so this is really, again, a consumer-focused set of materials that we are building out to also exist online. So there are sort of digital versions in a limited form right now on the Connect to Effect website, where folks can engage in these types of activities at their own pace. But the idea here is really, how do you begin to get people to, and here the slides really walk you through the kind of how to do it. How do you get people to really start to think about who their network is, who currently they are connected to, and then really begin to think about the strength of those connections. So, taking, as the name implies, an inventory of your friendships and major relationships, and really thinking about, this is my starting point. How do I begin to add people into this mix, or how do I begin to pull people closer to the center? And we talk about some of the principles of connection and help people really begin to think about, the richness of their relationships and the types of support that they derive from the relationships. Then once we get folks kind of in that frame of mind, we take them through really setting up a connection plan about how often they might try to reach out to the different folks that they've identified, take stock of the different ways that they can continue to bolster that connection. And then the activity goes on, or these can be done kind of separately, to building out something that we call the connection plan. So, the best sort of research indicates that you want to try to be scheduling social activities, really taking intentional steps around, connecting to people on a pretty regular basis, whether that's a phone call, a Skype call. The research indicates that in-person connections are richer, are probably better for us than, seeing a face on a screen or simply hearing a voice. But seeing a face on a screen or simply hearing a voice is better than nothing. So those are key key ways of thinking that we try to get people into. How do you really begin to form a practice around socially connecting regularly? And then we also emphasize the importance of having sort of pleasant and stimulating activities. So how do we keep ourselves in a positive frame of mind around connecting, and how do we keep ourselves sort of engaged in the world that allows us to feel like we have something to share with others, that we have something to connect around. So how do we begin to sort of schedule out some of these activities around taking care of ourselves, these sort of self-care things that we talk about? It turns out that these are really important for helping us be in a frame of mind for connection. One of the things that we know about loneliness is that it has this sort of negative feedback loop. And you begin to feel lonely, and then you begin to feel more ostracized by other people around you, more sensitive to rejection. You just get into a more overall negative frame of mind that then makes it harder for you to be able to connect with other people. And it becomes this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. So how do we begin to sort of bring more positivity into our lives in a way that can help us stay in a better mood and stay in more of a place of connection? And then, of course, we highlight the importance of physical activities. I think some of the really best research to date talks about how important our physical well-being is to our ability to connect. You know, I think in particular, we're already seeing research start to emerge about deconditioning and how the sort of social distancing that many older adults have been doing, as well as kind of delays in getting health care, is likely to be leading to a lot of folks who are becoming more frail, becoming less able to leave the house. And all of those things are immensely isolating. So how do we really keep people active, able to connect? You know, you've got to be able to get out and walk to connect in most cases, if you're not going to connect online. So how do we keep people able to do that, and really developing a practice around it is the best way. So all of that, we sort of walk people through, have some discussion, let people share, and then really take this document that they've generated home with them, hopefully put it on their fridge or somewhere that they'll see it every day, and really incorporate it into their practice of connectedness. So that kind of wraps up the general presentation, but here I wanted to shift into sharing some of our more recent resources and some of the new pieces of this that are coming online. So the Commit to Connect is the administration for community living's overarching initiative around isolation and loneliness. As part of it, there have been kind of a number of challenges to try to stand up some of the technology components that we think will be necessary to help folks identify resources and communities and connect to them. You know, there's just a wealth of resources, and I want to give you kind of a quick tour of some of them if I can share the website, because I think there's some really great stuff here. So one sec. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing the web page now. So this is the Commit to Connect web page. I would suggest that you bookmark it and check back often, because I think there is lots more coming. You can find over here some different kind of consumer level ideas about how you can kind of reach out to different folks in your lives. and connect to them. The activities and resources, I think is really right now one of the richest parts of the site. So here on the left-hand side, we're trying to aggregate just a lot of the different resources that have come into existence over the last several months. ACL has been supporting the N4A and the National Association of Area Agencies on Aging on developing their own resource center for engaging older adults. They have lots of great resources and ideas for folks out there in the aging network to begin implementing, all kinds of great ideas of programming to begin to implement, as well as different consumer facing materials. Here we also have some info on different technology support that's available, some coverage of some of the different same websites that we had talked about previously. I think here are some really good different resources that have come into existence. Most of them have come into existence over the last couple of years, actually, for keeping folks engaged. The AARP Friendly Voice project is, I think, one of the newest, and the idea is essentially that it's a call outline where you can sign up if you're feeling a little lonely or disconnected, to get regular phone calls from an AARP volunteer just to check in on you and say hi. So that's one project that's going. There are similar different warm lines all around the country that are doing something similar. Perhaps you have programs actually that are offering different sorts of reassurance calls and things like that. There are some really good programs around that. Sage Connect, for instance, focuses on the LGBT population. There over here is, where is it? Lost it. Maybe it moved off of this page. I think it's actually in this link. You know, just the there's a national call-in line for older adults experiencing kind of suicidal or other mental health crises, where they can get immediate support. So a lot of different activities like that. And then there are also down here, we have some different resources around technology, information for caregivers and families. So really a lot of different stuff here that folks can begin to get involved in. And then we also have different resources here for awareness generating. So different types of PowerPoint templates, infographics, social media graphics that you can download to begin to help tell the story. And this will be a continuing sort of growing site where there will be different aspects of campaigns launched here for different populations. I'm gonna go back to my slides if I can. So 1 second. Okay. So okay. Some other great resources online for generating awareness are coming out of the National Institute on Aging. They have a couple of great different infographics here at the website listed, as well as a great little piece on understanding loneliness and social isolation, how to stay connected. So a nice little a small package that can go to older adults to really help them begin to think about what this issue is for themselves. And then I wanted to take it up kind of a level to talk about some of the things that we need to be doing within communities to begin to address this, and some of the sort of systems change that really may be necessary around this. So this is actually both a programmatic model and I think some important insights about systems change here. So one of the projects we have funded over the last few years is some work coming out of Cedars-Sinai that looked at how to use exercise classes to really support aging in place and to deal with the issue of isolation and loneliness. And as you can see over here, we found that really community-based group health participants do show decreased loneliness and isolation, even 6 months after their participation in such a group. So here again, we think that, first of all, the physical activity is really important. We're keeping people mobile and healthy and able to engage. But then we also know that there are important benefits to group activities, obviously, for folks who are isolated. One of the principles of best practice is that bringing folks together in groups to have shared experiences, especially shared learning experiences, is a really powerful opportunity for connection. And I think, part of what our theory here is that also when you are getting people physically moving in sync with one another, and sort of doing this thing that could be new for them in many cases, exercising in a class, it really puts them in a great frame of mind for connecting to one another, feeling like they can support each other, feeling supported, and really just opens them up to connecting in a new way. So we think there are a lot of important things that kind of can happen in group exercise classes. At a systems level, I think what we saw happening here was really important too. So the model here works in the Cedars-Sinai healthcare system, where various departments in the system, from the primary care providers to the social workers to all different types of specialists, were educated about this issue of isolation and some of the programs that were available in the community. And so then when they felt like a patient was experiencing isolation, perhaps struggling to connect or feeling lonely, they could refer them into this LEAP program. And so from there, one of the key pieces is a sort of health coach. In some other spaces, I'll tell you about a model where these folks are called community navigators, but essentially the principle is that you bring in somebody who can help really assess that individual's level of functioning, level of need, challenges related to isolation, and then really help connect them to that appropriate program. So in this case, they were offered some of the different evidence-based programs, like Tai Chi, some of the different falls prevention programs available, and were helped to enroll in that. The other, to enroll in whichever one was sort of most appealing, most interesting, and appropriate to their needs. The other important thing is that health coach helped prepare them to participate in it. So before the pandemic, in most cases, that person was helping them find the nearest center and how to get there, helping to figure out if there was a need to arrange transportation for that person, really making it possible for that person to participate. As we shifted into the pandemic, they were able to continue the program, and instead had that health coach really focus on the technology support necessary to keep people participating in the program virtually. So in this case, they sort of would often add kind of a session 0 to the mix, where the health coach would really do some testing of their systems, really do some of that troubleshooting to help them, learn to use Zoom or whatever platform the group would be meeting on to really make it possible for older adults to participate in a meaningful way in those classes. So all that is to say that what we're really seeing is this great emerging of models where you're really figuring out how to catch people at the point of care when they're most likely to be disclosing to a professional sort of the actual circumstances they're experiencing, and then for that professional to in the context of their role say that this is a serious problem that has serious consequences for you, but we can help you avoid this isolation and loneliness that you're experiencing. So then beginning to connect that person to a navigator who can dig a little bit more deeply into what's going on for that person and begin to connect them to the right resource to meet that need. And so I wanted to share kind of one other little model that we've seen emerging. This is another way that CareMore, which is an insurer in California, has developed what they call their togetherness program. So they work to identify members that they insure who are likely to be facing issues of isolation, sort of looking at the data that they have on folks. Who do we know is living alone? Who do we know really doesn't have a lot of support, or perhaps is newly widowed, or maybe caregiving for somebody? And then how do we look at these different goals around helping to build more connections for them, helping to increase the connection to the support that they already do have in place, and then how do we really help them re-engage with their healthcare and stay healthy and physically able to continue to engage. So we think this is a nice sort of way of kind of framing out the issue and thinking about some of the different ways that you can begin to frame solutions for people. In the realm of trying to build new connections for folks, they do kind of weekly phone calls where they do some empathetic listening to the participant, which also has recently emerging good data around it as a helpful intervention for isolation and loneliness. Then they really look at what sort of risk folks are experiencing. Then in terms of increasing socialization, which we've talked about, they really look at what are those different barriers that that may be impacting in a person's ability to connect. What is I can't tell you how many times I've worked with clients here in DC where that 4-step front stoop that many row homes have is like creating the person might as well live in outer space. Being able to get up and down those stairs is so impossible that it has completely disconnected them from the world. So here in DC we have the Safe at Home program to help that person build a ramp and make their home more accessible. How do we get that person connected to that program, identify that need, especially if that individual has sort of, been living in that home for a long time and has accepted that that is the way the home is and that is the way that their life is going. So, it is a complicated, nuanced system where you really do, I think in many cases, have to have somebody, and this is why I'm becoming a social worker, really holistically look at that person, look at the environment that they are functioning in, and think about, what are the different barriers that somebody needs and what are the different right levels of support to help that person connect. And then, of course, the Togetherness program, as we've talked about, is trying to get folks to increase their physical activity, get the health care that they need to stay healthy and engaged, encouraging participation in those Silver Speakers types of programs. We've seen a similar and actually funded a similar model in Texas with a big provider there that has also been implementing a system for doing community navigation with patients who are identified as at risk or experiencing isolation. They have added into their mix of different interventions or program offerings, different types of spiritual components where they, when participants identify, that they are affiliated with a spiritual community, and that's an important aspect of their life. The Texas program helps connect folks into different church-based programs that are in operation around this issue. So again, what these entities have done is taken the time to really begin to look at the community and look at what already exists there, what are the different resources and services that we have in place, and how do we begin to tighten those up, shore those up, make sure that the people who need those are getting into those, and really do that resource navigation to what already exists and what already we know to work in communities. And then I think this is my final slide before I'll see if we want to do some questions or chat. There are a lot of different online activities that folks can engage in. There's a new AARP virtual community center, which has all types of different events, classes, fun things, learning things that folks can get involved in online. And we think that's, really important and will continue to be important throughout the pandemic, but just beyond, helping equip older adults to operate in an increasingly digital world and make the most of those different technologies, we think is very important. And to that end, I wanted to highlight agingconnected.org. That's the Getting Older Adults Online blurb that you see there on the right. There's some really good resources there about helping folks get internet access, get connected to something that can affordably get them online. And I also wanted to highlight that they're offering the Aging Connected program is something out of OATS, Older Adults Technology Services, which also offers the great seniorplanet.org, which is a really great online space, again, for more different classes, events, sort of all focused around, for the most part, digital inclusion of older adults and really having those resources that are targeted to this population. They've also launched this Senior Planet hotline that you can see down at the bottom that folks can call and get some of that tech support that they might need. And then finally, I wanted to highlight, this is sort of hot off the presses, still in the works. The FCC has announced a new emergency broadband benefit, which my understanding is, at least for the rest of the public health emergency, they will be covering both the portion, so for anybody who is already eligible for Lifeline or who would be eligible for Lifeline, the cell phone program that you can get when you're also SNAP eligible, et cetera, you could now be eligible for this new emergency broadband benefit, which would cover two things, actually. So the first part would, part of it, I think, is a certain amount of dollars to go towards a device. So, actually trying to make devices accessible to older adults and affordable for older adults. This program will cover a certain amount of the cost of a device, and then it will also cover the monthly broadband costs up to a certain amount. Part of that will be working in collaboration with the different internet service providers to offer different packages and things like that. but we're expecting pretty soon, within the next few weeks, to have programs and packages available out there on the market that can really, I think, start to help low-income older adults especially get online in new ways and to really be a powerful resource available out there. So I think I will stop there. That's the bulk of my slides, or all of them. And just really see if there are any questions, any comments. I would love to hear from you all what you have sort of seen in your state in relation to this problem, what the experience there has looked like, and what efforts are underway. But I'm here for questions if you have them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Casey, for your presentation. Kevin Robertson has been collecting questions. So Kevin, are you ready?
Yes, and Casey, wonderful presentation. We've had some great feedback already, and I know there's some great questions here. I'm going to start. The first one actually comes from Connie. She said, early on you shared a slide that said more susceptible to flu, ? The numbers are showing low flu issues this year, and they are saying it's from folks isolating at home. How does this make them more susceptible?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a good question. So yeah, so the study that refers to is sort of pre-COVID times. So we're sort of holding aside that data, and what that really was looking at is how the essentially being isolated and lonely wears on your immune system. It really, in a number of ways, creates inflammation in your system, raises your stress hormone in many cases, which makes you more susceptible to all types of illness, actually. So what that data point reflects is that we know in a normal, whatever that is anymore, world, where people are engaging in a more regular way and we're not all stuck at home, that folks who are isolated essentially have depressed immune systems and become more susceptible to different types of illness. Again, a lot of what we think happens is that folks are simply experiencing loneliness, essentially wears on our body, increases our cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone, which increases overall inflammation in our body, which really is, linked to just a range of negative physical consequences. So it does get a little complicated with the COVID picture and this idea that isolating right now is a protective thing that we all need to be doing to a certain degree. But it also, over the longer term, it accumulates and wears on our immune system in a way that's very damaging.
Great. Actually, let me go ahead and just mention to everyone that the slides that Casey shared they are listed on the ncp3a.org website. So just know that. Casey, the next question actually comes from Myra. She says, is it possible to get a copy of the consensus study, Social Isolation and Loneliness in Older Adults, Opportunities for the Healthcare System?
Yep, it is actually available for free for download on the National Academy's website. If you just Google the full title of it, you should find it. I think you have to register for the site, but once you do that, you can get the report for free.
Great. The next couple of items are actually just some comments from Connie. She says that they use relieving issues of social isolation as one of their marketing tools at their Friendship Adult Daycare. And then they are also using phone calls /email/mail as a way of keeping connected to our participants and their caregivers and keeping them connected to them, or to the Friendship Adult Day, and the larger community during the pandemic. They call it virtual hugs. They're also encouraging friendly visitor or friendly drive-bys. They come by the center, blow the horn, and she goes out and talks to them from the sidewalk while they sit safely in their cars. This has been especially beneficial to their folks with memory issues, as they can see who she is and that they're still there, and the center will open when it's safe to do so.
That's great. That's really great.
The next, let me see, Joanne is asking, how do you feel about the government giving seniors a discount to the internet services so they can gain access to Alexa through Echo Dots or related devices? And then she says, I feel this would help lots of seniors, especially with the video camera feature, to have someone to also check on them visually.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I appreciate that question. So actually, AARP Foundation has a program called Connected Communities, where we have been working to equip senior housing properties with those voice-activated devices, the Amazon Echoes, Google Home types of devices. So the first thing I would say about your comment is just one of the things we've been learning is how voice-activated technology is really, in some cases, more accessible for older adults when they don't have hearing problems. Interacting with, your Alexa or whatever is a little bit more easy and intuitive than learning how to operate a mouse, touch screen, all of the windows and buttons and things like that can be really intimidating for some older adults. So that's the first thing I would say, is that we think there's real promise in voice technology for older adults. Then the other piece is, I think, you sort of raised the question about telehealth, telewellness. Yes, that I think is also one of those pieces that is so important, and that there's this real opportunity around is, how do we get more and better healthcare to folks? I think the reality from what I have observed is that we have been so much in crisis over the last year that we really haven't taken advantage of that opportunity. And my hope is that now that we are sort of starting to see some sort of light at the end of the tunnel with the pandemic, that we can start to really take some of the lessons that we've hopefully been learning and figure out how we can do better to connect people to care that's more routine, that better meets their needs, that's more accessible, by really building off of some of the telehealth, telewellness pieces that have begun to emerge. And I think, one of the things we're engaging in is, for instance, building in collaboration with one of our grantees, a telewellness toolkit for senior housing providers. So, for instance, how do you go in and help those settings where there are lots of older adults already begin to get wired, bring broadband into the whole facility, and really make that technology available to everybody there. So we think there's some great opportunity there, but it's sort of been hard to, I think, realize because of what we've all been struggling to deal with over the last year.
Well, Casey, I think I could even go through some of those workshops with you. Now, the next question, Myra is actually asking, have you hosted a Friendventory workshop online/virtually with a group?
I have. Yep. I've hosted a couple. We've had other folks host a couple. I'll say it's not perfect yet, and it leaves a lot of room for you to kind of experiment and try different things, but it is, folks really do enjoy it. I think one of the struggles is talking about this issue of isolation can just be a little abstract for people. And it's hard to sort of key into that. Well, what do I do about it? What do I need to be doing for myself? So I think people really appreciate that chance to get some real practical guidance around, okay, these are actual things that I could do about this on a more regular basis to be in, be more connected.
So if someone would like to maybe take part or to watch one of those, would they go to the website to register for one of those events?
So the way that we've been doing it now, and I can't promise this won't change. So part of what we are building right now in the coordinating center is really a national network around this issue. And so there will be a place emerging soon-ish on the Connect to Effect website where that sort of activity of connecting to other folks who may be hosting it is available, where, sharing some lessons learned if you've hosted it, where all of that sort of stuff will live and exist. We're not quite there yet. So the best you can do is download the workshop and the facilitator's guide. Right now it's kind of on a, if you want to, you can do it basis. And if somebody schedules one, I'm certainly happy to let folks know and they can try to jump in and listen in on it. But yeah, right now we don't have a huge volume of them sort of going on, or if we do, people are sort of surreptitiously downloading it off the website and doing what they will with it.
Gotcha. And that is the final question I have that was chatted in. Nancy Warren, I know she had sent me a message. She may have some questions. Nancy is on the board. So, Nancy, if you want to unmute and let me know if you do have some questions, I'll be glad to go ahead and let you ask those.
Sure. Hi. Thanks very much, Kevin. I actually put my questions in the chat box. So,
okay, they must have come to Ann. Yeah. Did you get those? But go ahead, Nancy. Why don't you just go ahead?
So I sent them to all the attendees because it was kind of a question. So one question is, it seems like worshiping communities are a natural fit. Whoops, I lost my train of thought here. Okay. Are a natural fit for assessing social isolation and loneliness risk and providing help and services. And is there any intentional connections being made?
I think that's a really great question, because what we do know is that a few things. So the science tells us that first of all, folks who are or who get more engaged in a spiritual community are less likely to be isolated. So spiritual communities and spirituality seems to have some linkage to better connection. I think a big part of that is that churches, faith communities have historically been really involved in this work for a long time. Many have, had different sorts of outreach ministries, meal delivery programs, programs serving their homebound or shut-in population. So I think there is a really natural connection there. Now and so I think, part of, as we build out our national network, we are looking at some of those, some of those different big religious entities as sort of part of that, or how do we connect that piece in there? Now, the caveat that I would put to that is that, as I said, there are real protective factors. So folks who are already engaged in a spiritual community are already less likely to be isolated. So, in some ways, it's a yes and, there are great opportunities to work within faith communities, to build off of the great work that they're doing, to form better connections there. But there is still going to be a large population that is not served by those entities, that is probably even more at risk and vulnerable to isolation, and figuring out how to not exclude that population, or make sure that we are adding in some way of finding and helping that population too, is really important.
Yeah. And this is Nancy again, and I just wanted to say, while you were talking, I actually went to the Commit to Connect website and actually took a risk assessment. I played with it a little bit to see what would happen. So what I found was it was really easy to use, and it gives you immediate feedback. And so I just wondered if I think it could be really useful in the daily practice of our adult protective services folks and their colleagues, service providers, and I wondered if anybody was using anything like this. I mean, I would encourage y'all to go and take that risk assessment and get, and put some different answers in and see what, when I did mine on purpose, it came up a high risk. So so that's very informative for people who are trying to figure out what's going on in someone's life that's, that they might be able to help with, that they might not otherwise, just grab a hold of right off the bat.
Yeah. I will say that another big component of our work as a coordinating center is we have been building out a more statistically reliable and validated version of that. That hopefully will be something that we ultimately make available there, and that it's also actually, so it's being used in that Texas healthcare project that I talked about as their assessment tool to link people up to resources. But I couldn't agree with you more. I think that these types of tools are pretty useful, and certainly we've built ours on the Connect to Effect website to skew towards telling you you might have a problem and what you might do about it, because we just wanted to make it as informative as possible. But again, the idea is how do we get more of these types of tools, especially into providers, professionals, hands, because I think it does really help to link up that here's what the problem is and here are some of the different pieces of a solution, because it really, there is no silver bullet around this issue. It's not like hooking somebody up to home delivered meals and then the problem is solved. It's a multi-factor problem that has to be come at from a few different angles.
Thanks.
Nancy, did you have another follow-up?
No, sir.
Okay. I do have another comment that just came in from Billy Lister that says that their agency, mostly folks are gravitating to the local programs that they have in her area, and they are working with the Appalachian State University program, helping them with technology and connectiveness, along with the North Carolina BAM, Caroline. But they do send out links to the resources. They use best practices to learn to stay connected for their folks, and they try to stay in touch with all of them as often as possible. We haven't been able to track how many are using these resources on their own, and they're also using many types of social programming on their phone calls and drive-through events through daily meal sites and through virtual events. And then I do have Myra Austin. I am going to unmute her because she has a comment. Myra, you should be unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to add about the faith. So we've done a lot of work in Orange County, North Carolina with the Department on Aging regarding the faith communities. And the challenge for, and I mean, we've done this over a number of years. The challenge is getting to the right person, because oftentimes the pastor is not the right person and the lay leadership is but we, up until the pandemic really hit, we did a quarterly faith breakfast, outreach breakfast that was held at the one of the UNC hospital facilities, and we fed them free breakfast, but we still struggled to get, of 150 plus faith communities, really a handful of people to attend this quarterly. And we send out, it's in our e-newsletter, and we do a direct mail outreach to those communities. But I mean, I think it's a great idea in theory, and we've, like I said, we've pursued it, copying mimics of the Memphis model and those kinds of things to do community outreach, but still a challenge to reach them. And I'm also oversee the operations of the 2 senior centers in Orange County. And so we've continued to, in addition to that component, do things like we have telephone reassurance. We also took a look at all the folks registered in our system that we had not had contact with since the pandemic, and we are fortunate to have social workers on our staff and some social work interns. And so we've tried to reach out to over 1,600 people to find out kind of what are their needs, what are their computer needs, those kinds of things. And we're in the final stages of contacting all those folks and putting together what that, looks like and how we can outreach. And we do use some of the tools that you mentioned, Casey, in your great presentation. Maybe not as actually identified as the way you listed them or as the way they're listed in the presentation, but we do quite a few things in terms of outreach to the older adult community.
That's really
Thank
great.
you.
That's great. One slide I realize now I maybe should have shared and didn't with you all. It's just I think something you kind of highlighted there is how it can be really important, at least as we're first trying to get hold of this problem, to stratify this problem by need and how we approach it. So if you kind of think of a pyramid, and the bulk at the bottom is sort of the general population. It's all of us needing to think more about our social health and take more steps to build strong connections, to shore up our social support, to pull ourselves a little bit away from this big myth about how important it is for us to be independent as we age, because the truth is that we're interdependent people and we need to embrace that as we age. So at the bottom of the pyramid and the bulk of the population is how do you focus on that kind of preventive messaging around healthy steps to take, what we all need to be doing on this issue. And then up at that tip where it's a smaller piece of the population, but the problem is much more acute, and it's folks who are already truly isolated, cut off. And how do we build more intensive services and supports that really focus on that piece of the population, and figuring out how to lift them up out of isolation, which is a much bigger challenge than keeping somebody out of it. But it's a good way to focus, I think, our initial energy around the topic.
That is all the questions that have come through the chat feature. So, Ann, do you have any final thoughts or comments that you would like to provide?
Well, we'd surely like to thank very much Casey for coming to us and bringing the resources to us so that we might connect and share with those in our within our scope. Thank you, Casey, and all the best to you in your work. May you have immense success, and we look forward to hearing more. Casey, would you be available? Are you accessible as our attendees, our participants here have questions regarding any of the programs that you have mentioned, any of the resources that you have mentioned?
Absolutely, absolutely. Feel free to give out my email address. It's ecasey@aarp.org. I'm happy to connect with anybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to our AARP NC colleagues. That would be Lisa Regal and Steve Hahn. It's been great having you, Casey.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. Y'all have a good one. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Laura,
Well-
just to let you know, I can't make April a presenter, but I'm able to unmute April. So if you want to go ahead.
Okay, great. We're going to take a break in just a minute. But before the break, I'd like to introduce you to Black. April is an adult program representative with the Division of Aging and Adult Services. And the partnership recently did a webinar that was pretty well attended about partnering to provide protection against abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And it was filmed, and it is available for folks who weren't able to access the webinar at the time. And April's going to give us just a little bit of information about that. April, are you there?
Here, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So hi, everybody. We are excited at the Division of Aging and Adult Services to collect and review stories from our local Department of Social Services. These stories are going to tell about the challenges that we know you have all faced in your service to these vulnerable adults in North Carolina. We do know that everyone is pressed for time now more than probably ever before. But we want to assure you that this valuable data that really tells the human story is going to be shared with our community partners like NCP3A and others who are going to advocate for support for those individuals who we know you are all advocating for. So we know that you need that advocation. We know that you want your voice to be heard and the voice of your clients to be heard. So we really just encourage our DSSs to go to our SharePoint site. We have the survey available on the APR consultation piece of the SharePoint site, as well as you can watch the webinar that we did in partnership with NCP3A, which we called APS Real Stories, Real Impact. So please help us to get these stories. We want to make sure that we hear from all 100 counties. If you are a social work staff member, make sure that your leadership have a chance to review your submission. But we are looking forward to getting more and more of this data.
Thank you, April. April, if someone is not with a DSS, how would they go about getting access to that webinar so they could view it?
So that's available on YouTube, and I have a link, but I'm not sure if I can drop it in the chat. So would it help, Laura, if I send the panelists the link and maybe you all can drop it in the chat?
Sure, if you'll send it to Kevin Robertson.
All right, I'll do that right now so you all can get it.
There was a lot of good information presented in the webinar, most particularly about funding for protection and how much of that money is county dollars. And it's really staggering when you look at how much money is spent and how little of that money comes from state funding. And so one of the goals of doing the real stories from Adult Protective Service cases is so that we can share that information with other advocates and legislators to let them know that, you know, the abuse, neglect, and exploitation happens everywhere. It happens in all socioeconomic groups, and it happens to people you know. So it is important that we keep funding and awareness of you know, abuse, neglect, and exploitation on the forefront. So thank you, April, so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. It looks like it's 11:10, so if everyone could please come back at 11:20, that would be great. Thank you.
still have about 7 minutes on the break, but for those of you that are already back, I did put the link that April mentioned in the chat box. That's from the DOS and NC3PA Real Stories, Real Impact presentation. So feel free to check that out. Just a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded. We should have it up on the website by tomorrow afternoon and make it available for everyone that is wanting to listen to the presentation from Casey again, which provided great information. We have about 4.5 minutes left on the break still. Again, just a reminder for those that are back, I did place the link for the presentation that April and Laura were talking about in the chat box. Please let me know if you did not receive it. Thank you, Laura, for letting me know that you got it and you posted it in the minutes. We have about 2 minutes left on break, and folks will be coming back. Just a reminder for folks, if you didn't hear me earlier, the slides from the presentation are already posted on our website, and also the link that April Black mentioned regarding the real impact presentation is listed in the chat link or chat box, and they will be in the minutes as well.
Just want to say, Kevin, you're doing a hell of a job with all this technical stuff.
I
Thank you,
agree.
John.
Man, I tell you.
It's learned by fire, I think.
Yeah, but we appreciate it, Kevin. We're proud.
Hey, if this Department of Insurance gig doesn't work out, you got yourself a new career as an IT specialist.
Well, thank you. Maybe I'll need to look at IT. It probably pays more.
Yeah. Trust me.
I
I have no idea what our IT people do, but they get paid a buttload for it.
Amen.
Nancy, did you just see my chat to you?
And by the way, Ann Elmore, I got your chat, and I'm watching for Tandra to get logged back in as well.
Thank you, Kevin.
Laura, it looks like it's 11:20. If you want to get started again, feel free to take it away.
Thank you. Before we get into our committee reports, I wanted to share a little information with you all that was provided to us this morning from the Division of Aging and Adult Services, and it's related to the Coronavirus Research and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2021, and it's about grants to enhance adult protective services response to COVID-19. The Division of Aging and Adult Services is in the process, the starting process actually, of starting the paperwork that they need to get this grant. And it's really exciting because it can be used for so many things. Some of those things are improving and supporting remote work, such as communications and technology, hardware, software, and infrastructure. Costs associated with establishing new or improving existing processes for responding to alleged scams and frauds, especially those related to COVID-19 vaccine or cure scams. Costs associated with community outreach. Costs associated with providing goods and services to APS clients related to COVID-19, acquiring personal protection equipment and supplies, paying for extended hours and overtime for staff, hiring temporary staff and associated personnel costs related to APS, training costs related to COVID-19, funds for travel related to or required by COVID-19, and costs associated with assisting Adult Protective Service clients to secure the least restrictive option for emergency alternative housing, or with obtaining or providing or coordinating those care transitions. At this point in time, the Division of Aging says that North Carolina appears to be slated to receive $2,813,974. Y'all, this is a phenomenal amount of money for North Carolina to use, and I know the Division of Aging is excited about it, and I know I personally am excited about the opportunity for social services to have access to this money to help in defending against abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Nancy, anything you want to add? I know Nancy and I got this information this morning. You're good? Okay. So now we're going to move on to our committee reports. And the first one is our Education Committee. And that's Ann Elmore and Tadra Martin. They're co-chairs for that committee. So Ann, Tadra, do y'all have any updates for folks?
Thank you so much, Laura. See, if Tadra's not yet on, could we just circle back to the Education Committee? I'm hoping that Tadra can get back on. She had.
Oh, okay. I saw her name earlier. You're right. I don't see it right now. We'll skip you and come back. AFSA committee, Nancy Warren.
Okay, sure, great. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all this morning. I'm always glad to talk about something. Of course, the news that Laura just shared about the new federal dollars that are coming, and that was the original funding package. And since then, of course, there's been the American Rescue Plan Act, which also includes historic funding for elder justice. According to the Elder Justice Coalition, its inclusion of $276 million in additional Elder Justice Act funding. And so we can expect to receive even more funding into the issues of adult protective services. It says this funding, combined with the initial $100 million provided in the first package, is a strong recognition of the importance of adult protective services and long-term care ombudsman programs to help prevent COVID-19 related elder abuse. This is from the Elder Justice Coalition. And so, yep, so it is to say that elder justice, adult protective services, elder abuse is on the radar of the federal government is, I think for the first time, maybe ever, that we've really gotten that kind of recognition, and we're excited about where it can go. I did want to share just the letter that we had talked about in the past, which is we refer to as the partnership's legislative support letter. And I think Kevin was going to help me put that letter up on the screen, just so you can all see what our efforts are. Thank you very much, Kevin. So this is a support letter. It's an advocacy support letter that we use to share with anyone and all who are interested in advocating for adult abuse, neglect, and exploitation of older and adults with disabilities. So the second page is really the important part that I want you to see, folks, of the partners that we connect with the Senior Tar Heel Legislature. If you stop there for just a second, Kevin, thank you very much, so that I could see what it says. The Senior Tar Heel Legislature is urging the General Assembly to recognize and value vulnerable citizens by making $8 million in recurring state funds available to protective services. And then the County Directors of Social Services Association, these are their funding, their advocacy statements that they shared with us, so that we could put it all together in one easily usable letter. And we encourage you to use this letter if any of you are interested in doing, sharing information about what other organizations are doing. If you want to share this with your colleagues, maybe with your committees that you are serving on locally, etc. The Governor's Advisory Council on Aging, and Roger Manison, that as the chair of that, has always been a really big proponent and supporter of adult protective services, and they are advocating for the governor to really advocate for increase in state funding for protective services. And even AARP North Carolina has taken a position with regard to the funding of adult protective services. So this is what the Partnership to Address Adult Abuse is about. It's about, making sure that we partner with folks who are like-minded, and that we can advocate to improve adult protective services in North Carolina, so that we can achieve our mission and vision. So just so I'll say it, these priorities are consistent with the partnership's mission to promote safe communities for older adults and adults with disabilities in North Carolina through prevention, recognition, protection, and prosecution of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And that's just a real visible way that we're able to do that with others. So that's I think that's my advocacy report for today.
Nancy, did you want to mention the link for an article that you sent me to share to everyone?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that. Right. There was an article by Tommy Goldsmith. I don't know if you all got to read it or not. In January, advocates say Adult Protective Services needs a multi-million-dollar boost from state to fight abuse and neglect. And that was an article by Tommy Goldsmith at the end of January of 2021, kind of the cook-off of the legislative session. So I think you just put that in the chat, right? Yep.
Yes.
Yep. So I would, if you're doing, training for community providers, even, I know there's folks on the call who might be doing that around their home and community care block grant providers, or if you are part of a multidisciplinary team, you might want to grab these pieces of information and share that with others so that they know that there is something beyond just what's happening in your own community to kind of grab onto and be hopeful about.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. I
And
appreciate
Laura,
that.
just to let you know, Tadra is back on. I can't make her a presenter, but I am unmuting her if you would like for Ann and Tadra to go next.
It probably, let's see.
I'll let them wait just a
Maybe
minute
one-
since
Okay.
Tadra just got online, and we'll go ahead and go with the awareness committee, which is John Marin and Stephanie Bias. I don't think Stephanie is with us today, but I know John is. John, take it away.
Hey guys, yeah, Stephanie, I tell you, she's irrepressible. She is out and about. I saw her earlier. She's up in Edenton at American Legion Post 40 doing a ship event. She's been to baseball stadium in I think in Lenore County. She's just all over. She you can't keep that woman down. So she's out there doing awareness and spreading the word. Ann and I are doing what we can as well, doing events virtually. I'm hoping that as I'm seeing senior centers sort of talking amongst themselves about reopening and what reopening looks like. I'm hopeful that sometime in the near future we can start planning some in-person events. We've done some webinars and virtual events, but as we all know, there's nothing quite like being in person and actually interacting with people and engaging directly. I think I'm hopeful that there's going to be a pent-up demand of people wanting to see my ugly mug out there in person. So we're looking forward to that. I know Ann's got a webinar, I think in April 6th with Land of Sky Regional Council. 2:15 to 3:15. So if anybody's interested out that way, feel free to shoot us a note, and we'll be glad to hook you up with that. We've also done, Ann has done, I have to, hats off to her, done some events here lately. We did a round of our department is an authorized CLE provider for the North Carolina Bar, and so we did a series of CLEs at the end of February. I think attorneys had sort of an end of year requirement to get their CLEs done, and so our agency did a range of CLEs and did one on investment fraud prevention from the non-securities attorney's perspective. We also had our notary division doing notarization CLEs. I think together now, I think multiple attorneys, since they were free, attorneys were looking to snap up whichever ones they could get. But I think combined, we had over 1,000 attendees at these different events. Now, one person might have attended 2 or 3 of them, so it's kind of hard to know exactly how many discrete individual folks there were, but we had about 1,000 or so people attend them. So we feel good about that. I'm looking forward to the conference because I think we're going to have a good keynote presentation on the helpful platform that I keep mentioning in talking about the ways for making referrals from APS and financial institutions with regard to suspected fraud and abuse. So I'm really looking forward to that. We are, my agency is having internal discussions because we're getting a lot of referrals from APS offices, which is great. As we sort of suspected, most of the referrals are actually things that aren't really our area of jurisdiction, but nevertheless, we're still pleased to be getting them and people thinking about our agency as a possible referral source. Ann and I will do some further outreach, and if there's any DSS office, APS office on the line now that is interested in having some in-service presentations or whatever, feel free to reach out to either me or Ann, and we'll be glad to schedule something. So I think that's about the end of my presentation. So Ann, do you want to jump in and supplement or in any way?
I just want to bring everybody's attention to the reality that April 16th is National Healthcare Decisions Day. And if folks will go to our website, the Advanced Healthcare Directives Registry on the sosnc.gov webpage, you'll get all the statutory forms and links to some organizations that can help walk people who are interested through the process. But the forms themselves are on our website, as well as a lot of helpful guidance. But that is April 16th, just to make everybody aware of that. Thank you, John.
Yep, and just as a supplement to that, if anybody's interested, the General Assembly has extended special allowance for remote video notarization. They made it sort of, the old law expired on March 1st, so the new law that the governor signed goes retroactive back to this past March 1st. And extends it through December 31st. So remote notarization is still available now. It's still legal. So.
And the same is for the emergency video witnessing. That has also been extended by emergency law.
Right. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is Tadra still on the line? I don't see her on my list anymore.
Tadra's on. I can't make her a presenter, but I'm able to unmute her.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and unmute if you want her and Ann to do.
All
Tadra,
right.
you're now unmuted.
All right. We're going to hear now from the Education Committee, which is Ann Elmore and Tadra Martin. Ladies, take it away.
Sure. As you know, we're working very feverishly with planning the conference that's scheduled for May 17th through May 19th. We have our education committee meeting this Friday, where we'll be going over we're getting to the finish line soon, so working on those last minute details. We pretty much have the sessions and the breakout sessions and our speakers confirmed, and it's just getting those little last few tidbits in so we can make sure we get approval for the necessary CEUs and get back the honorarium agreements. So it's been a heavy lift, but it's taking form. It's taking form. So, and Ann has been great better than and making sure it takes form.
It takes a team, Tadra. In fact, thanks to all of the executive committee and the members of that planning committee, which includes more than our executive committee. So thanks to all of you who are on the call that have been participating, and you others who are on this call, we may also reach out and say hello to you, because to bring the kind of training that is so worthwhile, that will enable all of us to do more, it takes a village. So we do have a committee meeting on Friday from 9:30 to 11:30. It'll be on Secretary of State Security's WebEx. Will be sending out the link for that. So if there's anybody who's here that did want to participate, if you would please reach out to us, one of us, and let us know. Thank you so much. And actually, Laura, one other thing, our next meeting will be on May 19th as part of that conference. And so the speaker will be speakers. And it will be from the 17th through the 19th. So please mark those dates on your calendars. We'll be sending out details very soon. Thank you, Laura. Laura, you're on mute.
Laura may be muted. Yeah.
Sorry. Special thanks to Ann and Tadra. You guys have been really working. And I hope everybody will attend the conference and see all the wonderful, wonderful speakers that are lined up. It's really exciting this year. I tell you it is. Plus expanding the conference itself is exciting. Next, we'll hear from Laura Slobach or April Cox, our communications co-chairs.
Yeah, it's actually Autumn. So just to be mindful of everyone's time, I know we're a few minutes over, so I'll keep it brief, but just want to encourage everyone to check out the website. We have some really good information that's been posted. The save the date for our conference is on the website. We also have some information around Elder Abuse Awareness Month, which is the month of June. So if you want to check that out, there's some links to free resources and things like that that you can share and create and make your own, so that can be distributed, as well as a couple educational opportunities. So make sure you're checking the website, checking your emails, and feel free to reach out if you have anything. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Kevin Robertson is our membership chair and nominating committee chair. Kevin, have you got anything for us?
I just want to mainly remind folks that if they haven't sent in their membership application and dues, to please do so. Also, we encourage you to ask others to join as well. I think we keep the cost very minimum for folks, and especially for the return on investment that you're getting with the wonderful presentations like we're having today, and then the wonderful conference that we'll be having in May. So we do ask folks to join. It can be an individual membership, or you can even be an organizational member, and that information would get mailed in to Pam Palmer, or to the partnership address, and then Pam would take care of that information for us. So please continue to join, and we appreciate all that you are doing to help folks in your communities.
Kevin, I'd like to add to that, please. If you do mail your check in with your application, please send me an email letting me know, because I do not go to the post office that often. And if you would prefer to pay online, let me know, and I can send you a PayPal request.
Great, thank you. All right, now's the time for members to share any updates they may have. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share?
Laura, while people are gathering their thoughts, if they want to send something in the chat about any upcoming item, if you want, maybe we can start with the executive committee. If anybody has something they want to share, that way they can unmute themselves, And then for attendees, if you have something, if you'll put it in the chat, I'll be glad to read the message for you or to unmute you if you want to give your brief
Right.
update.
We'll give you all just a few minutes to enter stuff into the chat box if you need to. One thing I know the partnership is looking at doing another webinar, possibly in September, with our partners and highlighting how important it is to work together and look at what our partners and folks we collaborate with are doing to prevent abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So we're looking forward this summer on finishing that up and getting things going. So hopefully there'll be another webinar in September. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add from the executive committee? No? I don't see anything in the chat box. Kevin, are you getting anything?
I have not received anything in the chat box either.
Okay. Well,
John may have something for you.
No, I did have an email or a chat message that came to me about the Helpful Project, and I'll just encourage folks to give me or Ann send us a request, probably through our email. My email address is jmaron, JMARON @sosnc.gov. If you're interested, and we'll be glad to try to set something up.
and John, aren't we going to be hearing from you on the Helpful Project at the conference as well?
Probably. There's
I
probably
think
a good chance.
so. So that'll be a good place to get some good information, y'all.
Yeah.
Good.
Laura, still no messages in the chat.
All right. Well, I think we're going to say that folks don't have anything to share right now. We've given people a few minutes to put their stuff in there. So thank you all so much for attending. We appreciate everything you do. It's so important that we all work together to prevent abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And we're so proud to be part of the partnership and work towards eliminating or at least decreasing the abuse, neglect, and exploitation that occurs in the state of North Carolina. Thank you all so much for attending. We hope to see you at the annual conference. Thank you.
Hope everyone has a wonderful St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you.
Same
Thanks,
to
Kevin.
you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.